Hi, this is John from John's Record Collection. This is box number 13, Growing Concern to Dashiell Hedayat. Here is my latest box number 13. It starts with an album by a group called Growing Concern. So this is one of the albums on the Mainstream label. Like I said before, Mainstream had a lot of good psychedelic acts on it. They were able to make money off of Big Brother and the Holding Company, which was Janis Joplin's group, and they made a lot of money by basically selling the rights to Janis Joplin's group to Columbia Records. But because of that money, they were able to experiment a little more and they were willing to spend money on psychedelic records. Unfortunately, the rest of those bands didn't do so well, but Growing Concern, it's a male-female kind of flower power psychedelic group. Very nice. And This is one of the rarest and most unusual records in my collection. Peter Grudzien, album number 1, The Unicorn. So this is, it's psychedelic. It's also very gay. So Peter Grudzien was a guy who was present at the Stonewall Rebellion, the beginning event that led to the modern gay liberation movement. Peter Grudzien, he had a kind of a hillbilly background and came from the Appalachians, I believe. And these are songs he recorded over a very long period of time, almost kind of as a one-man band guy. And they're like from the 50s, I think almost from the 50s to the 70s. But they have a very idiosyncratic viewpoint running throughout. And there's a lot of homoerotic content in the songs, which is very unusual for psychedelic music of the time. So there's songs like White Trash, Hillbilly Trick, or, he talks about his Jelly Roll, and, very interesting, very, very unusual homoerotic metaphors in the language, along with some very beautiful psychedelic sounds and some country rock sounds. It's kind of all over the map, but it's all kind of fused together under one very idiosyncratic personality. It is a very rare record to have, and I feel very privileged to have this record. Peter Grudzien, The Unicorn. And this is, I think, The Private Sea of Dreams, Il Gruppo. Il Gruppo was an Italian group, kind of an experimental classical music group that was kind of marketed as a psychedelic band. And I believe Ennio Morricone, the film composer, has something to do with Il Gruppo. But this was kind of on the level of all the weird stuff that even major label record companies were putting out during the 1960s. And here's another, so this is from Cuba, I think. Grupo de Experimentación Sonora del ICAIC. So I believe this is a group of experimental electronic music that was done in Castro's Cuba for some reason. Nice psychedelic cover. And I think in fact, this is the second album of that kind of music. Grupo de Experimentación Sonora ICAIC. So the communist world was also delving into experimental psychedelic music just as much as the capitalist world was in the 1960s. Don't ask me why. It was just the time. I guess the drugs were really good. And so guess it's Fidel Castro getting high off his ass. This is Guitar. This is a series in the Chevron Music Makers series. There's a one called Drums that a lot of the hip-hop people like. This one's called Guitar. I think I found it in the wild in a record store, so I didn't have to order online for it. But, you know, it's a good record. Has some blues guitar on it, some more modern stuff. And well, this is a very nice guitar instrumental record, the Guitar Ramblers. So if you like that kind of twangy guitar that sometimes you find in early Quentin Tarantino movies, this is the kind of stuff that'll give it to you. And what do we have here? This one, Guitars, the History of the Guitar in Sound and Song. Unfortunately, the cover has seen much better days, but it's a fun little record about guitars, and it has a lot of spoken word bits about guitars and sitars and all kinds of different instruments. Oh, this is another witch cult record, Gundella, The Hour of the Witch. I got this as an original before there were any reissues. I think there might be a reissue that was done a couple of years ago, but this was, at the time I got it, there were no such things as reissues of this, so I had to get an original. And Introspection number 4. This is kind of a beatnik, jazz, lounge, poetry thing. And here, this is Guru. So I think this is one of, oh yeah, I got this for $5. I can't believe this. But yeah, this is a krautrock band, and I guess I got it really cheap back in the 90s or early 2000s. And let's see. Here's another one, Gypsy Boots, Unpredictable. So Gypsy Boots was part of the Nature Boys movement. It was a pre-hippie movement. If you've watched my video with the letter A, you've seen Eden Abez. So Eden Abez was kind of a really big guy in the Nature Boy movement. Gypsy Boots was also in that movement. Unfortunately, he has a lot less musical talent, so this is kind of more of a novelty record than a straight-ahead, legit music record. Oh, yes, so I'm at the beginning of the H's, and that stands for Bruce Haack, H-A-A-C-K. Take heed of that name. Bruce Haack is amazing. He is an electronic musician. He made children's music, so he was a pioneering electronic musician that pretty much only made children's music, but he made the most far-out children's music you can think of. So this one, Captain Entropy, is designed to teach physics. The cover shows that this one's a reissue. Some of the other records he did had a bit more of a very primitive black and white cover. I think this is another reissue, Dance, Sing, and Listen, with Miss Nelson and Bruce. Miss Nelson was a woman who had a very, enthusiastic voice, who accompanied Bruce Haack on some of his records. Basically, these records are very, 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 it's written by people who didn't lose what it feels like to think like a child. And so they're very, very enthusiastic and effusive records, in addition to having a lot of weird electronics on it. So they focus on what kids like rather than what adults think kids would like. And that's what's great about these records. So here's another Bruce Haack record, Dance, to the Music, created and performed by Bruce Haack and featuring Esther Nelson. So that's Miss Nelson. And here's one of Bruce Haack's Christmas record, Ebenezer Electric. So this is his version of A Christmas Carol, but it kind of has, you know, when Ebenezer Scrooge turns out to be a good guy in the end, he's talking about love vibrations, and because it was the, you know, late 60s, early 70s. And this is the only major label record he did, called The Electric Lucifer. And I mean, this shows you kind of how weird this guy was. But this is probably the easiest. I mean, none of Bruce Haack's records are that easy to find, although if you can find somebody who had a lot of children's records, like somebody who used to be an elementary school teacher, you might get lucky and find a stash of records like this. But this one is his only major label record, the only one that wasn't really privately pressed. And so this is the Electric Lucifer, and it is, I think they were trying to make a psychedelic go-go dance record out of it, but it just didn't take. But it's an amazing electronic record. And one of my favorites, the Way Out record for children, featuring Miss Nelson and Bruce. So this is, these are the kind of records that they make if somebody made Flintstone chewable vitamins in LSD format. I mean, it's just, that's exactly what it is. If you can't imagine what I mean by that, you just need to listen to the record. That's it. And oh yes, and the electronic record for children. So that's another Bruce Haack record, and it's got all these kids, white kids and black kids with afros on it, and kids with afros with space helmets, and it's just an amazing cover. And the music does more than live up to the cover. And and I've got even one more Bruce Haack record. Here Comes Santa in His New Space Suit. Zoot, zoot, zoot. Here Comes Santa in His New Space Suit. It is basically a repackaging of the Ebenezer Electric record, but it has a Tiny Tim song called Zoot, Zoot, Zoot. Here Comes Santa in His New Space Suit added to the record. And so that's the Bruce Haack records. And this is the Hakamu 71. It is a Canadian Christian record. There's a Beatles song that they use as the musical backing for reciting the Lord's Prayer. So I got it because it's like a Christian record with a Beatles cover on it. So this one is Corky Hale. She did, and it's called Harp Beat. She is a harpist, and she did a bunch of jazz harp records, easy listening harp records in the 1950s, but she was still active in the 1970s, so this is one of those records. And let's see, Cosmic Key, featuring the Hallway. This is another lounge record with a generic cover of a sundial, and I got it because it has a Beatles cover, and it has a cover version of Aquarius. And Concrete and synthesizer music by Bengt Hambres. So this is another electronic music guy. And this is probably one of his better releases, Rota 2 and Tetragon by Bengt Hambreus. And let's see, what else? Okay, Jack Hammer is the guy's name. It's a stage name of some kind. I don't know what it is. So it's Jack Hammer sings and reads songs and poems of the Beat Generation Rebellion. So this is a record of beat poetry. Taking it to the streets, Hammond State School Performing Group. It is a group of developmentally disabled, I think, teenagers and maybe young adults, and it came out of Louisiana. They have a good cover of the Doobie Brothers, Taking It to the Streets. They do Uptown Girl, Material Girl. So it's some of the covers are more early 80s, and this is, so if you like Captain Beefheart, you like that kind of music, Hampton Grease Band, Music to Eat by the Hampton Grease Band. That is one of the albums to get. It is very, very much in the avant blues space, just like Captain Beefheart is. And the guy, I think his name was Colonel Bruce Hampton, who headed this band, the Hampton Grease Band, and he would sing, he would make the most weird lyrics. He even made lyrics out of singing some of the writing that was on a spray paint can, or there's another song called Halifax, which I think he took the lyrics from an encyclopedia entry about Halifax, the capital of Nova Scotia. Just really, really interesting stuff. And if you like that sort of grungy, avant-garde blues sound of Captain Beefheart, this is also something you might like. And let's see. Pay no attention to the dogs wandering in the shop. Herbie Hancock Sextant. So this is one of his sort of, I guess Herbie Hancock was kind of trying to imitate Miles Davis and some of Miles Davis electric period. I think he had some of the same people doing his cover art. This has some of the, some funky synthesizer on it, in addition to the jazz stuff. What is another thing that I should pull out? Bittersweet by the Hangmen. So this is a very nice garage rock record. There's a very good rendition of Fortune Teller. That it's an R&B song, but they do a really good rendition of it. And Hank and Carol Lee, Inquire Within. These were kind of, they were a little too old to be hippies, but they were from Hawaii, and they were kind of on this weird metaphysical spiritual trip, and they do kind of loungy music about it. And look at this dude, the guru in the sunglasses here. His name is Hansa Dutta. I'm not sure what his deal is, but obviously killer cover. The guru head, the guru hoodie and the mirrored sunglasses. This is a good one. This is from a children's record label called Happy House. Happy Monsters. It's really fun record, which all good children's records should be, and it has some wacky electronic effects. Definitely fun. it's a fun record. Hapshash and the Colored Coat. So this was a group out of England, and they were a bit like the group The Fool. So they started out as an art collective, and they were mainly an art collective that did posters, and they were offered a record deal, and a lot of this stuff is just like banging on pots and pans and droning, and it's a little like krautrock, except like maybe a year or two earlier before, the first avant-garde record. And it's some of the weirdest stuff that was ever put on a major label. So weird that it is a living proof of how strong the drugs were at that time. And Tim Hardin, really one of the best folk musicians and folk rock musicians. Unfortunately, he died of heroin in the early 1970s, but he's the guy that wrote If I Were a Carpenter. And he also wrote Reason to Believe, which later became a hit for Rod Stewart. And some more kid show cartoon stuff that I love. Here Come the Hardy Boys. So this isn't exactly the Hardy Boys of the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. I'm not exactly sure how somebody got the rights to the name, but basically they turned the Hardy Boys into like one of those bubblegum Josie and the Pussycats groups, and this is one of the albums they did. And now here's a guy, I hope you'll remember his name. He's really cool cat. Rufus Harley. So Rufus Harley is the only guy who got to be a jazz virtuoso on the bagpipes. So this one is called Bagpipe Blues. So this is one of his earlier albums. And there's, this one he does Chim Chim Cheree from the movie Mary Poppins. Basically, I think there's some liner notes from, one of these has the liner notes from Nat Hentoff, and basically the liner notes say something like, you think he's the square because he's playing bagpipes, but as you can tell, funky, if a guy's funky, he can play with a comb and some wax paper and make it sound good. And that's kind of who Rufus Harley was. So he basically learned how to be like the only jazz bagpipist in the entire world. And so he did a series of records, and I have a couple of them. Bagpipe Blues is one of them. And here's another one he did of the more psychedelic era, King Queens. It has a cover version of the Byrds' 8 Miles High, which is absolutely insane, even considering that the Byrds' 8 Miles High is such a great song as it is. The cover version is out of this world. He also has a couple songs on here that he does with African thumb piano that are pretty cool. Eventually, Rufus Harley, he was around for a long time. He's no longer with us, but I think he did some work with the Roots later on. So he was around for a long time. Okay, Rufus Harley, Scotch and Soul. I think this might be his first record. And, let's see, Vince Garrett is the guy that did the liner notes. Let me see. Can't seem to find what I'm looking for in the liner notes to this guy. This one has Scotch and Soul, so it has the title track. He did a song called Sufur, S-U-F-U-R, which is just Rufus spelled backwards. And then here is Rufus Harley, a tribute to Courage. And this is the one that has the liner notes I'm looking for. So it's I must admit that the first reaction of many listeners to the unusual sound of the bagpipes ranged from what is he playing to what kind of a sound is that. After a few nights of playing Rufus's record, my audience overcame the shock of hearing a man play jazz bagpipe and realized that even if a cat plays comb and tissue paper and swings, he swings regardless of the instrument he plays. So that's still true. So if you're a cat and you've got an instrument where you know how to swing, you still swing. All right. So Rufus Harley, A Tribute to Courage. So this one has kind of stuff about how Malcolm X died on it, and but it's still jazz bagpipe. And the guy did at least five records I have of him doing jazz bagpipe, and it is great stuff. I mean, the concept, he can keep the concept going for as many albums as he wants. And okay, here, The Harmony of the World, a realization for the ear of Johannes Kepler's astronomical data from Harmonices Mundi 1619. So it is an electronic composition based on 17th century astronomical data. And Roy Harper, Folk Joke Opus. Folk Joke Opus, I think, was the name of an old record store back in Minneapolis. And Roy Harper, he's a very interesting folk guy. And the guys in Led Zeppelin loved him so much that they wrote a song about him called Hats Off to Harper. He's the Harper guy from that song. And okay. Perfect Percussion, the 44 instruments of Roy Hart and Milt Holland. So I like a lot of those percussion records. Actually, there's another record behind it that I missed. Harry J. and the All-Stars, The Liquidator. So this is a record from the UK. It kind of has a lot of reggae, keyboard, instrumentals at a time when reggae was just first becoming popular in the UK in the late 60s. Reggae actually got to be popular in the UK before it became popular in the US. If you can find some UK reggae compilations, there's a lot of stuff that's really good, and it isn't all frat boys listening to Bob Marley. And what do we got here? Okay. This guy's a trip. He's an Asian guy who does a lot of psychedelic keyboard work. His name is Harumi. And I think there's even some teen dance shows which this guy appears on. I don't know if I've seen any footage of him on YouTube, but he was actually a thing back in the 60s, even though he didn't necessarily sell all that many records, but he sold enough. And so some of those records are still around. And Jeff Haskell, Switched on Buck. So this is a Moog synthesizer record of country songs that were written by the great Buck Owens. Buck Owens is the guy that did Act Naturally, which was a Ringo song, one of the songs that Ringo sang on the early Beatles albums. And I'm going to be in the movies, and all I have to do is act naturally. Okay, here, Jimmy Haskell, Countdown. So this is another space age rocketry record from the late 50s, early 60s. Definitely, that's an era I like to collect, and so this is definitely one of the big ones in the genre. And Ronnie Hawkins. If you've ever seen the movie The Last Waltz, the Martin Scorsese documentary about the farewell concert of the band, Ronnie Hawkins was the guy who, from Canada, who he was a rockabilly, kind of a rockabilly guy, rock guy, who taught the guys in the band how to play. And they were, so the band started out as Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks. And eventually they became Dylan's backup band and then became a band in their own right. But Ronnie Hawkins, this guy's an old school rock and roller. So if you want some old school stuff, pre-psychedelic, none of that pretentiousness, just unpretentious, straight ahead, old school rock and roll, Ronnie Hawkins is your guy. And Hawaiian Christmas. So I like to have a lot of variety in my Christmas records, so this is one of them. And Richard Heyman and his orchestra Cinemagic Sound. So this is another electronic music record in my collection. And Electronic Evolutions. So Richard Heyman, he's another one he did that's electronic music. This is one of his best, and it has an amazing cover. It's the Genuine Electric Latin Love Machine. Persuasive Electronics by Richard Heyman. So it's like all sexy Latin music, but played on a computer, and it somehow works. So definitely a very interesting concept, well executed. And this is one of the rarest Richard Heyman albums, although actually I don't think he actually played on it. Yeah, I think this was actually some work by Gianpietro Boneschi, who was an Italian electronic music composer, and it was put out under Richard Heyman's name, but it's Richard Heyman Presents the Electric People, and it's actually one of the rarest records he did. And then Eddie Hazel. So Eddie Hazel, he was this great guitarist for Parliament Funkadelic. So he was a guy that worked with George Clinton, and just an amazing guitarist. He's probably one of the greatest guitarists you've never heard of. And Lee Hazelwood and Anne Margaret, The Cowboy and the Lady. So Lee Hazelwood, he did a lot of albums with Nancy Sinatra, such as Nancy and Lee, but this is another one he did with Anne Margaret. He has a lot of interesting, he kind of has a gravelly voice, does a lot of interesting country and western stuff. The guy had a very unique songwriting voice. He's a very cult guy these days. And Head. So this was a record on Buddha Records, and it has 3 tracks on it. They're all named after drugs. So the tracks are cannabis sativa, mephedrine, and lysergic acid diethylamide. And so this is a very druggy electronic music record. And so here are some box sets that I have of spoken word by a guy named Gerald Hurd. Gerald Hurd was an author in the UK, and he was a bit of a mystic, and he was very close friends with Aldous Huxley. And so he was one of the guys who got Aldous Huxley into experimenting with LSD in the 1960s. So Aldous Huxley actually died on the same day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. But what was different about Aldous Huxley's death is that he was taking LSD when he was on his deathbed, because he believed that LSD would basically, I guess, give him a more mystical path to the afterlife or something like that. And Gerald Hurd was one of the guys by his side. Gerald Hurd also gave LSD to Bill Wilson, aka Bill W., the guy who founded Alcoholics Anonymous. That's not as weird as you might think it is, because people at the time believed that LSD might be a cure for alcoholism. So this is Gerald Hurd. So this is a spoken word record he did. This is another one he did. Explorations Volume 2, Survival, Growth, and Rebirth. So some of the recitations with keyboard music on here probably influenced some of the things that they did at the time Aldous Huxley was taking LSD on his deathbed. And then we have, this one, Heartbeat of Africa, Traditional Instruments and Drums of Africa. So I think this is mostly a field recording. I'm not sure I've listened to this yet, but it's one of my many African drumming records. And here's a good group. Hearts and Flowers. Now is the time for Hearts and Flowers. Hearts and Flowers was a group that Linda Ronstadt was in before she went solo. There's also a very good cover version of Reason to Believe, which is a Tim Hardin song that later became a hit for Rod Stewart. But they do a very good rendition of Reason to Believe on this. And there's another one called Rock and Roll Gypsies. I happen to like the song Rock and Roll Gypsies, but it's a really good folk rock record with some psychedelic tinges to it. And then let's see what we got. Heavy Duty Harpin'. So this is Heavy Duty Harpin', and it is a record that was Heavy Duty Harpin' that was released by the Hohner Harmonica Company, and it is a compilation of different people playing the harmonica. And one of the amazing things on this is the Cambridge Harmonica Orchestra's version of Paperback Writer. So this isn't just one person playing a Beatles song on a harmonica. This is like 30 or 50 people on a harmonica playing an arrangement of Paperback Writer by the Beatles. You just literally have to hear it in order to understand it. It is so bizarre, yet so wonderful in execution. And so, let me get to the last record in the box. Dashiell, can't even pronounce anybody's name anymore. Dashiell Hedayat. And the name of the record is Obsolete. I believe he's from France. So this is the guy who sold it to me. It still had this Gem Records. Gem Records was a way you could get imports in the United States if you were into records from the UK or Europe in the early 1970s. And this one has some interesting people on it. It has David Allen, who's from Gong, and it has the writer William Burroughs on it. So it's definitely not your run-of-the-mill record. It's a very unusual record. And so Dashiell Hedayat, Obsolete, and it's on Shandar Records. Shandar has some really good stuff by some of the minimalist composers like Terry Riley on it. I think maybe Steve Reich also did a record or two on Shandar. So I think it might have only been available through France, but if you find anything on Shandar, get it, because I don't think I've ever seen a record by Shandar out in the wild. So if you find something by that, please please go get it. And if you don't like it, give it to me. So, yeah. So, this is the end of box number 13. Based on what's in it, I think it's a very lucky box instead of an unlucky box. And that's it. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this unboxing video.